Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, people of all sexual orientations and identities, and welcome back to another review. And this is another book review. And today's book review is none other than Straight Expectations. So, what's Straight Expectations about, you may be asking? Well, imagine Freaky Friday, but the gay version of Freaky Friday. You have a young impressionable boy named Max. His life is, well, it's not perfect, but it's not terrible. He has a group of out and proud gay friends, and his world could be no better than it already is. But Max at this point in time doesn't see it. He has an argument one day with one of his friends and begins to argue about how he just wishes he could fit in, that he could be like everyone else, that he couldn't have these feelings for this boy, Oliver Cheng, he just can't stop thinking about. His argument spirals and spirals, and as he goes home that night, he wakes up the next day to a completely new world. But will this world be for the better or for the worse? Well, Max is about to find out. As he wakes up, he suddenly finds himself in a house that he doesn't understand and doesn't remember. His parents are together in this world, and to make matters worse, he's just found out that his best friend, Alicia, is not his best friend in this world, but his girlfriend. This conflicts him, as he still, in his own mind, has feelings for Oliver, but realizes in this world, things are about to get 100 times worse. Oliver in this world isn't the guy he admires, but instead is his best friend, along with this bully that used to bully him, and a bunch of other people he hangs around with. But there's one piece to the puzzle missing. His real best friend from the reality he remembers in his own mind, and that is Dean. Nobody seems to remember Dean, and this puzzles Max. Max doesn't understand. Where is Dean? Why does no one know who Dean is? And how comes his life has changed so much? The first signs he begins to notice in the story is the fact that his whole fabulous and over flamboyant wardrobe has now turned to nothing more than tracksuits and going out clothes, which Max doesn't quite see what's happened. He's confused. This isn't what he wears, this isn't what he would go out in. And so, for a while, Max decides to try and live under this straight stereotype that he believes straight people to be like. But the pressure's building, and he doesn't quite know how to keep things together. He's having a problem with his girlfriend, and to make matters worse, he still doesn't know where Dean is. He goes to the estate in which his friend should live, and the whole estate has crumbled under the wreck of a building construction site. His friend's home nowhere to be seen. He remembers how his friend doesn't use social media, so his search through the internet becomes meaningless. It doesn't help him at all. And to make matters worse, the pressure is building as his girlfriend gets closer and closer to him, asking and lusting and longing for his touch. Dean begins to slowly break the persona, slowly blending back into his original personality. He begins to wear polished nails and slightly flamboyant clothes, but still trying to keep it to a minimum. One night at a party, Alicia gets really drunk and tries to put it onto Max. But Max feels conflicted. He goes upstairs into the bedroom with her, and when it comes to the moment for them both to have intercourse, he pushes her away, feeling that it is wrong, knowing that this is not his life, this is not his Alicia, and most importantly, this is not who he is. He asks Alicia why she feels so compelled to do this, and she points out that this isn't the first time it's happened. This breaks Max, really breaks him. He feels clueless. This isn't him. This is not his Alicia. And most importantly, he doesn't know what to do in this scenario. He just wants the whole nightmare to end. And so Max eventually confides in Oliver, telling him about this whole theory about being in a parallel universe. Oliver obviously doesn't believe him, but feeling closer to Max, Oliver goes in to kiss him, hoping that this will make Max feel less paranoid and more at ease. But instead, this makes matters for Max even worse. His girlfriend catches them, and this causes a split between their relationship. She absolutely hates him, she can't stand him, and even though he chases after her, hoping to fix things, he knows there's nothing he can do. With all else failing, he finds his last resort. He must finally find Dean, finally find the answers he's been looking for in the first place, and hopefully Dean will know the answers to all of his problems. But there's a little snag to the story with Dean. He finds out that Dean left their school because of something that Max and his friends had said, bullying him on his sexuality. Instead, in this reality, Dean has gone off to the snobby, upper class school across from their town in another area, and is now going to be performing in a drag show on a live, massive stage. Max sneaks his way into the venue in hopes of getting the answers he wants, but when he gets there, rather than asking Dean and talking to him, he realizes Dean has no clue who he is in this world. He's completely forgotten him, he's completely forgotten the bullying, and most importantly, he's gotten over everything that was the past trauma. Max finally realizes that Dean wasn't the solution all along. Instead, Max was his own solution, and he just didn't see it. To break the power of this nightmare, this hell that he's put himself in, he knows that there is only one thing left to do, and that is to confide in himself and understand himself once and for all. Max suddenly wakes up back in his own world, and soon he realizes that everything is how it's always been. But now he's on a mission. He must fix the wrongs he's made and make up for it. In a way, a kind of Scrooge kind of, it's Christmas Day sort of thing. He goes searching for Dean again, this time to mend the wounds that they made. But Dean is broken. He's in the drama room. He feels helpless and he feels like his whole queer identity is too much, and that maybe Max was right. Maybe he should be ashamed of it. Maybe he should hide his true identity. Max turns up and goes over to the broken down Dean. He points out to him that he was wrong, that he should be who he needs to be, that he should be flamboyant, he should be free to be himself, and above all, he should be proud of his own identity. Him, Alicia, and Dean all make up, and finally, he asks Oliver out. Oliver takes him down to a trip, and they go up to a spot on the roof and have a lovely date. They get together and finally make it official. Straight expectations. What was my viewpoint on this story? Well, it's a great story. It's a story about love, it's a story about loss, and most importantly, it's a story about identity. And I think those are the three main things that this story gets absolutely on point. Although there is one little issue I would like to raise with this book. Although it does its best to try and cover the topic of race, the only one thing I think it lacks when it starts to talk about this issue is the ridicule, the discrimination, and most importantly, it lacks to understand that this is the same issue that it's trying to get across when it's talking about being gay, being bi, being trans. All of those things should really equate in this story. And I feel like the only thing separate from it is the racial identity. But other than that, I do think that Straight Expectations does a very good job at a gut punch to people who believe that just because they are who they are, or just because they've found themselves, that it's easy for people. I like the way that as the story progresses, we begin to delve into the way of people's communities, people's situations. And especially, I like that when Max has become straight in this story, how his gay best friend Oliver is trying to get across to him this feeling of being uneasy, this feeling of not being accepted, this feeling of not knowing who you can trust. Which is rather an irony when you think about the way that this is being taught to Max, especially when you consider the fact that he opens the book talking about a club, this club where everyone's accepted and everyone is understood. And yet, as the book progresses, we finally get to see that Max doesn't quite understand how much it hurts people when they don't feel like they have that backing. They don't feel like they can go to anyone. And I like how that's played off. I also like the idea that each character in this story gets their own little moment. Alicia has her conflict with Max. She also has her conflict with people in the school. She also has her conflict with her projects. In one world, she absolutely loathes and loves making her sets, and in the other world, she absolutely can't stand art. She knows that she could have done it, but she really doesn't have a care in the world for it. She's more worried in this other world about having a relationship and fitting in, whereas in the main world, which Max is from, she's really committed and determined. And then, for instance, there's Dean. In Max's world, Dean is driven, is flamboyant, is proud. And yet, in the other world, he's proud as well, but he's more doing it as a facade in a way of that he has finally been given an opportunity. Whereas the Dean in Max's world is appreciative for everything he's got, especially on the basis that he knows he might not always get those chances. People might not always see what he sees. Oliver and Thomas both have their separate stories. In one world, Oliver is a proud, out gay man, and in the other world, he's also gay, but he's more held back. He's more restrained. He doesn't know whether Max is gay, and so this makes him very afraid. Whereas Thomas, on the other hand, even though he's been a bully in both worlds, he really does start to feel the pain behind his eyes when you start to see that he knows he's done wrong things. He knows what things he done when he was younger, and the name calling he done was wrong. And he really regrets it. And I feel like in both worlds and in both situations, you can feel sorry for both characters. Not because not just because they've learned their lesson, but because they've also started to see the world in a completely new light. Started to see people for more than just witch hunting. One character I feel like had a really good backstory as well was this trans character, where in one world she transitioned, and in the other world, Max is in the library, and although he knows that those feelings are there, he knows that in this other world where he's straight, that this transsexual isn't quite sure who to talk to, and she's really trying her best to be proud of her identity, but she doesn't feel like she has the backing. So, as a summary for this story starts to ask the very core questions. Is it right just because someone is your girlfriend in another world to think that you can advance on them? Is it right to think that you're on top of the world in your own world? Is it right to think that just because you have everything, that nothing matters at all? And the things on the opposite side of it really starts to show is the similarities and differences between two worlds. It starts to prove to us what we sometimes take for granted, and especially our friends. This story also touches on family. It talks about conflict and happiness, and how sometimes you can't have everything no matter how much you want it. No matter how much you want a parent to stay together, no matter how much you want friends to stay together, life always changes. And sometimes it's hard to accept that change. But most importantly, it's important to, because you're learning. You're learning and you're seeing how people evolve, how people change. And especially you're trying to watch people be happy, not let them live in misery. So what do I give Straight Expectations out of 10? Well, just because of the slight snag issue I mentioned earlier with the racial identity, I feel like I have to give this a 9 out of 10. But other than that, I do love it as a queer story, as I feel like it really starts to get down to the core being of this thing about being who you are. And that's what's so beautiful about it. Whether you're gay, straight, bi, or trans, it really does open the door, and it really does represent everyone in every single different way. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in another book review. Until then, stay beautiful, stay slay, and most importantly, be gay. Thank you. Goodbye.